Hi, folks, with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about, and something I've spoken about before, residential real estate prices, people's homes, and the changing in the ratio between the price of the property and the incomes that are in the West. So that equation. Now, I'll just gather a few numbers here. Between, say, and I'm looking at Australia here, it varied a little bit depending on the region. But between 1970 and 1997, house prices stayed relatively constant at between 3.2 and 4.1 times gross annual average wage or average income. Remember, that's the average, and it's assuming one income, an average income, one income. So 3.2 and 4.1 times. Now, 1970 was closer to the 3.2. Now, so that's the time when 3.2 years of income, this is gross income, you had to pay tax out of course, but 3.2 years of gross income could buy you the average priced house, whereas rent was between 20 and 25% of your income. It was assumed that about a third of your income paying repayments, mortgage repayments, was about the upper limit. You wouldn't sort of want a whole lot more than that. And the assumption, of course, at the time, 1970, was a single income earner, or that single income earner would make pretty much all the money, and your 2.5 children type thing. So now that was the days, of course, when, as I've mentioned many times before, when a factory worker at the local factory, their purchasing power of their wage then was enough to buy buy a house, have a car, a basic car, basic house too. It wasn't anything fancy. A basic car, and have an annual driving vacation once a year to somewhere decent. So, when they travelled, they would stay in 2.5, 3-star hotels, and that was just the average wage. So the purchasing power was pretty serious back in the time. This is when a gallon of petrol was 30 cents and that sort of stuff. Okay, so today, of course, it's vastly different, and that change started to come in quite sharply at around 1997, and like property. I bought a property at that time for, I think it was $350,000, and that's over $2 million today. So in 25 years, it's gone up 650%. That gives you an idea of the extent of the inflation there. So I've sold it since, by the way. So since globalization began, 600+% appreciation, inflation on residential real estate, but wages haven't gone up anywhere near that much, and that's reflected in. Whereas in sort of 1970, it took 3.2 years of average income to buy the house. Today, it's 17 and a half times average income to buy it. So years, that is 17 and a half years average income to buy the house. Now, what they do sort of silly little games here, which annoys me, but in order to try and make out that the difference isn't as great as it is, the various think tanks and propaganda units and finance companies, all that sort of, they say, well, the difference isn't really that much. The same people that tell you, no, mass migration, it's not happening. If you say that, you're Hitler. And so they've switched from the average income as in a person, and now they've changed the average household income. And so they say, well, instead of 17 and a half years, it's actually 14.9 years of income. Now, they've inflated the house prices in 1970 quite substantially, by the way. Now, if I go online and get newspapers from, say, 1970, and I look at their real estate section, like the residential real estate section for sale and for rent, that sort of stuff. Look at that, and there's lots of houses that are 8,000, 9,000, but they're semi-detached houses. This is when there was the move out to the suburbs from the cities and the inner or mid-distance suburbs and to the outer suburbs where there were large blocks of land, half an acre and that sort of thing, and quite large houses. So the houses were much bigger and the land was much bigger, and this was seen, this suburban thing was seen as the new direction, as indeed it had been in the US. So what they're playing around with in doing the numbers today is to say, well, we won't include apartments and we won't include semi-detached houses in the inner city, which were relatively cheap at the time. Again, you could buy a 3-bedroom semi-detached inner city place for $9,000. And instead they go into the larger, they just look at freestanding houses on bigger plots of land and say, well, that's the average price, when it wasn't. That's nonsense. Now today, when there's many more apartments and so on, and that type of thing, townhouses and semi-detached houses, so today then they do include that, which brings the price today down on a relative basis. So they're playing games here, comparing apartment prices with freestanding house prices, comparing houses that today are on 400 square meters of land compared to houses then that were on 2,000 square meters of land. So they're playing around, so not comparing apples to apples. So the difference is quite considerable. But anyway, it doesn't matter how you crunch the numbers or how you try and soften it. The difference is that it takes 17 years of average income today to buy the average priced house, as opposed to 3 years back then. So you can see that real estate is if you look at that multiple, real estate is more than 5 times more expensive today in purchasing power terms than it was. Now, I wouldn't have sort of thought it was quite that much. I just thought it was more, 3 times more expensive in purchasing power terms. But that pretty well illustrates. Now, if you take in household income, and then that brings it down, so it's not quite as purchasing power terms relatively as expensive. Now, if you have 2 people both on an average income, and they've got no children, then you could say, well, that would bring it down from 6 times to 3 times. So there's not many places now where you don't have a double income, unless someone's got lots of children, and they tend to have a higher income or be on welfare or be working in the underground economy. But I was just looking at there was a smaller country in Europe, I suppose you call it a middle level economy, and they've been pretty good at sort of keeping out the globalists. And I'd been watching it on and off, and you could see the pressure the globalists were putting on investment, bring investment in jobs and investment. And the political class, which had been quite socialist, really, they resisting that, so that you still saw the same equation there, that the average wage, if somebody would be spending around 20 to 25% of their average wage on rent in say one of the larger towns or cities. Now that's about right, in the real world, before the globalization machine. But then the government changed, and then an investment friendly, as it was termed, government took over. And we need to look at international investment. Is international investment that investment's going to come in and it's going to build lots of factories, create lots of jobs, that it's going to more efficiently build houses or more efficiently build roads, or there are going to be more bridges or better quality sewerage or something, that sort of thing. It doesn't mean that anymore, assuming it ever did. What it means now is that big money will come in and buy up swathes of real estate, artificially pump the price, and artificially increase the price of all sorts of goods and services, so the people can't afford it. So the people are forced to live communally, whereas they couldn't previously, or they have to have 2.5 jobs, or they got to work 7 days a week, and all those sort of things that just to get by. So in this sort of like 10 years ago, 25% say of someone's average wage would be consumed in rent. that's changed now the 2.2 times. So 225% of the average wage is required to pay rent. Now you can look at other things like just rent a room instead of renting your own place, or go into rent a place with lots of other people. But that's really how they have to live now. They have to live communally, and so that's quite a drastic change. So when the government says we're going to be investment friendly, in the new term of what in globalization it means that big money and offshore money laundering, all that sort of stuff comes in and buys up the real estate. Now, also, what you notice in these things is where the government makes a decision they're going to open up the market to the international buying community, and they're going to allow them to profiteer. So you find that the key politicians and all the folks in the know and the local bankers, they're all buying up the local real estate, quietly moving into position, and then in comes the rush of international money, and these guys clean up and make a fortune, and the rents go up through the roof as well, but wages don't increase at anywhere near the same rate. And the jobs that are created are the things like lots of fast food and takeout food shops, and where these people are mainly international peasants are brought in to work at these things, which further undermine wages and just lower the standard of living. So if Western politicians want to do something, anything for their fellow citizens to improve their standard of living, they need to return residential real estate. Office real estate's different. Residential real estate, return it to the same ratio, affordability ratio that was in 1970. Things aren't more expensive now. If anything, building's more efficient and that sort of stuff. So they need to return it to that. Now that means one of two things: either the price of houses needs to come down, and it's a bubble price situation anyway, so it's not hard. So international buyers need to be prevented, and also people buying up swathes of real estate. Another thing that the left is arguing, that the only reason real estate rents are so expensive is because people are buying them to do like Airbnb and things like that. That's bullshit. That's bullshit if it has any effect at all. And they're assuming that every Airbnb is a standalone house, and it's not. But most Airbnbs are rooms or little small garages that have been converted and things like that. So this idea that they're all houses that are being taken up, that's crap, absolute crap. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.